It is that time of year for us to talk about fall still, and we are going to go over all things seeds for fall, from saving to planting to quick planting, just everything. So come join us as we break down fall seeds right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening. We are your hosts, Ben in Batavia, and you can find me gardening in the country.
And you'll find me gardening in the city. Get ready as we dig deep into this
wonderful world of gardening, where we learn to grow and grow for change. All right, everybody. If you would like to support our show, because we are a listener-supported show, you can come check us out on Patreon, and you get 2 extra episodes a month amongst a whole bunch of other benefits. Or simply enough, you can come check us out on YouTube, Backyard Gardens TV. Give us a watch, subscribes, likes, all that good stuff. Dig deep. There's all kinds of videos on there. And help support the show so we can keep this show rolling just for you, so you can get better in your garden.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, there's that.
The camera just went crazy.
No.
So fall. We're in our second episode for fall. And the first one was how much space to dedicate for fall. But this one is specifically about seeds. So if you haven't started your seeds yet, don't fear. We got you covered. We are going to talk about specifically seeds that you can plant that will harvest, that will grow quickly for fast harvest, and stuff you can direct sow. Right?
Right. Trying to get out of my I'm trying to get all of my pictures and facts and stats together. Going to my favorite website. I have a plan here.
Oh, here we go with the favorite website. Okay. So where are you on your fall seeds? Are you starting any yet?
Yes. So the majority of the things that I plan on planting, as far as different types of things, are things I started from seed. But I do have some that I am waiting to direct sow. Actually waiting until like probably tomorrow, based on when this airs, to direct sow.
This is Hail Mary time. So if for some reason there's some seeds that you wanted to start and you didn't, there's still time to start other seeds, but some stuff it's just plainly too late for. But there's still a lot of things that can go in the garden right now, and then you can continue to harvest. Mm-hmm. And being that it is, what's the technical end of summer? Is it September 21st?
It's in the 20s, yeah, something like that. Okay.
We'll just say the 21st for sake of argument. We're in the end of summer and the garden is wild. It's, you probably, if you're anything like us, you can't control it. Now it's doing its thing. And now that it's starting to cool off, things are growing more and more. So it's a good practice to start thinking about stuff we're planning for fall. And for some reason, I just duplicated my camera by itself, and I have 2 Batavias on my screen. Ooh. How lucky am I?
Everyone should have 2 Batavias.
Everybody's dream.
Look, Batavia needs 2 Batavias.
Look, it happened again. What's going on in the world?
Oh, yeah.
I can only handle 1 Batavia. That's all there is to it. So, as our plants are growing and getting kind of crazy, there's stuff that we can't keep up with. And I feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of jump right in and talk about saving seeds. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah. Well, if you're saving seeds at this point, there are 2 versions of this. There's saving seeds for things that have been producing all summer, and then there's saving things that you could, potentially even plant back out, right? So I did want to comment on if it's too late, just really quickly, only because, I'll save that story. I'll say you guys have to wait until after the break.
Okay. I can't wait. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat.
Oh, no, that's how it's designed.
But no, I mean, seriously, like this time of year, things might be slowing down a little bit. You know, your tomatoes are producing slower. Your green beans you may have some overgrown green beans, which are like prime candidates to start saving seeds. I think it's a great beginner seed. You know, for me personally, my marigolds, they are starting to just basically be all seed pods. So that's a good one, an easy one to start seeds, you know, start saving with. So, you know, tomatoes that are sitting on the vines, cucumbers that have been over ripened, stuff like that. Like, this is a perfect time to just leave them on the vine and let them mature and ripen and get those seeds ready to harvest, because a lot of these plants are starting to slow down.
Yeah. And why are they starting to slow down, young Ben?
Because there's less sun in the sky and it's getting cooler. Yeah, that non-sexy subject about the sun. But you know, and so it happens to me every year when my cucumbers actually do produce, that I have one that just does what it wants to do, and you can't stop it. You know what I mean? So I just let it continue, and then at this time of year, I will come through and harvest them. You know, let them sit there and finish out, and harvest them and let them go. And same with my green beans. Like, dude, green beans are ridiculous. They're like the easiest thing to save because you can't hardly pick all of them. So, and invariably you're going to miss a handful of pods. So just let them thicken up and get ready, you know?
Yeah, I think that just based on the way that both of those plants grow, and especially if you're growing green cucumbers and green beans, it's very easy for them to be hidden. In, you know, the leaves. And then also, I eat a cucumber that was closer to overripe faster than I eat a bean that is. You know, like once you miss a window for a bean, it's kind of like, you know, I'm not taking it off of the vine for the purpose of trying to eat it. There are a bunch of things you can do with overripe cucumbers. And obviously in both cases you can save seeds, but I'm just talking about like you can still consume some overripe cucumbers. But for beans, man, let them do their thing and go ahead and save those seeds, because you won't enjoy it if you try to eat it. Yeah.
I mean, like for me, I let a zucchini just go. And then once it got giant, I pulled it off, and then I kept the seeds, but then I took the pulp. I took the actual zucchini itself once I got the seeds out, and I ground it up and froze it for zucchini breads and stuff like that. So
interesting. And just to make this a quick note, when it comes to, you know, both of those beans, zucchini, cucumbers, you know, a lot of us try to harvest it when it's younger before it starts to produce seeds. Yeah. Right. You know, and so the idea of leaving it kind of lets that life cycle continue. Right. Yeah. So a bunch of the ones you've harvested over the summer, you're like, okay, where are the seeds I'm supposed to be saving? Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet. Right. You know, you picked it off, you know, in most cases, rightfully so. I enjoy them much more before I get a bunch of seeds in them, you know. So just as a quick note, a lot of y'all probably know that, but some may not. So that is my lesson for the episode.
I thought you were going to keep going. We have a little bit of a connection issue again, so there may be a little bit of stepping on each other, but we'll try and get through it.
No, that was really more of, we talked about the recording time, and you told me that I would be hungry, and I felt like I knew myself, and I wouldn't. But here I am.
So is this the moment when you realize that I know you better than you think I know you?
No, I think if I look now at the time, I'm trying to think back to what I said. Yeah, I was supposed to be eating before this if we waited until this time. But if we would have started recording 35 minutes ago, I would have just been like, you know, kind of round and third. I could have pushed through. But now we're at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
It's going to take everything in me. All right. Okay.
Anyways, we're going to move on because Batavia is going to get hungry and we need to keep this show going. But, you know, one thing that I've been wanting to save seeds from and I haven't has been tomatoes. Mm-hmm. Have you saved seeds from tomatoes?
Yeah, I have. Now,
do you do the fermenting process?
I've tried that once or twice. Or, you know, like the water floating test.
Yeah,
right? That's what
you're
saying, yeah.
No, the ones where you put them in the water and you let it mold over and then it ferments them and then you get better germination.
I've not done that.
Yeah, I tried to do that, and it turned out into a giant science project, and I was in the doghouse, so it didn't work out well. But that's one thing, too, is, you know, your tomato plants are coming to their end at this point if they're not already done. Mm-hmm. And you may have, like, a couple tomatoes that need to ripen up. And those, again, they're prime time. Just let them go. And, I mean, what's one tomato going to do for you? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just let it go.
That's also something to think about. Like, if you have any vegetables that are damaged, whether it's, you know, weather, whether it's some critter, you know, think about where they are kind of in the ripened state. You know, just don't toss it. You may be able to save some seeds from it. I actually have for 2 years in a row intended to let a volunteer plant go, because I'm still not convinced for a tomato plant that I thought I was planting, what's the one? Brandywine. The first year I started the seeds, this is in 2020, and I planted 2 of them out, and they didn't look like Brandywines I had grown before. It was basically like a salad-sized tomato, like a little bit bigger than a cherry. And I still can't figure out what seeds I had to produce that, other than like maybe like the package of seeds was just mislabeled. So anywho, I've had them volunteer over the years, and I really enjoy it. The plant is very prolific, you know, and so I've meant to, for say 2020, I meant to save seeds that first year when I got surprised / disappointed / surprised. Didn't. They volunteered the next year, meant to save seeds, didn't. Right? You know, so I don't know if the package of seeds I have will still produce that tomato, but I've been trying to save them. And I'm looking now to see if what's volunteering this year is that same tomato. I'm not quite sure yet. So that's some really good examples of, you know, me trying to save a seed. I don't think that package was an heirloom, so I could end up with something different, but that's okay too.
Well, I mean, you'll figure it out next year, right? Either way, you'll be happy you have a tomato seed.
Yeah, I think I need to try to remember to. A part of me I probably should just buy another package of Brandywine seeds and just, you know, be done with it.
Yeah. You know what another good one to save seeds from this time of year is okra. You've probably got an okra pod that has sat on the plant too long, and it's just let it go. You know, just ignore it, let it go, keep an eye on it, and then get those seeds out of there. Because I know for me, like my seed starting shelf it's a combination of seed starting and seed drying. And so come, you know, from about this time all the way up until I'd say December, I've got a plethora of seeds sitting on that shelf drying and just kind of, you know, because you don't want to put them away wet or they'll mold. So I've got them laid out. You know, I do like my black-eyed peas and stuff like that. I always save a couple. This year, black beans, hopefully. The jury is still a little bit out on those, but not completely. But, you know, I'll have a whole rack full of just a couple little like plates of seeds that I've taken, or I use little plastic bowls. I've been reusing them for years, and I'll just go and I'll shake them up a little bit and make sure they're drying. But it's a very good time to do that because you're multi-purposing and using these tools that you've implemented in your house for different things. So yeah. So, and I mean, that's just for summer, but that's like a good thing we can do before we start planting some of these other things we're going to talk about in this episode. Get
some more use out of your, you know, kind of summer crops before you transition. Okra seeds, and I double checked it. I thought they are one that it needs to completely dry on the plant. Like the pod needs to be completely dried out. And I struggle with saving okra seeds, and they're really expensive too. Because based on timing or whatever have you, the pods are not completely dry before winter comes. But if you're in a position where they have, then absolutely save those seeds, because they're like, I don't know, they're like $1 million seeds or something. Other one, quickly before we go to break, sunflowers. If you grew them around this time, you should be having some sunflower seeds that are dry on the plant that you can harvest to enjoy, but also save for future planting.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a bad sunflower year. I started off really good, and then they all got dried and died. So I don't think they like the heat too much, like the big time heat.
How's that possible that they're reaching for the sun? They want to be closer to the sun.
They don't want to be closer to the sun, apparently. So, at least in my yard. Okay, so you've got your seed saving going on. You're watching a couple green bean pods, or you got a tomato going, and that's good. But you can still, at this point, especially on this day, you're probably still getting, do you think it's safe to say some significant summer heat still?
Yeah, as per timeanddate.com, past weather. I was looking back at my September 2021 weather. I'm in Chicago, Illinois, and I mean, it's not directly related to this because your garden zone is about kind of lowest temps, but I'm in garden zone 6. And I had like one day last year that was 90 degrees. I did have a bunch of days where the highs were 80s, but we were definitely on the, as the month went on the road
downward
to cooling
trend.
down. Yeah, just barely though. I think by the time we got to like the 20th of September is when all right, as my mom would say, your playhouse is coming down. Summer's coming to an end. But we still had some pretty, summer hot days. The lows though, not the home improvement store, but the lows were definitely reminiscent of fall in that month.
Yeah. And see, for me, it's a little bit later than that. Like the next month, I'll start getting them. But at the same time, we got to, this is a prime time for us to put some of our seedlings out. Mm-hmm. And while that tomato is finishing its ripening process, you can go ahead and plant in the shade of the tomato to give that plant enough time to get its roots settled. So when it does cool off and that plant is done and you cut it, it'll already have its roots settled, and then you just need to add some sunlight.
That could be a step for hardening off as well, that plant providing a bit of shade.
Yeah, you can harden off under that too, because this is the time frame in which we need to be hardening off our seedlings that we started. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of, using that method will help you. One, you can save space, and ultimately what it means is you're getting that plant used to being in that spot. So a lot of times we'll harden off in different places and then we'll move them over to, the garden. And that's fine and dandy. But generally what happens is you're hardening off in less sun than your garden's going to get. So it can still be a little bit of a shock. Mm-hmm. But if we're hardening off like that, then you should be good, because the difference between now and spring is we're not trying to keep things away from the freezing. You're just trying to get it acclimated to, generally like a 20 degree temperature change versus like for me, I can harden off and it'll be 75 degrees during the day. And then at night it'll be 30. So you're talking about a 40 some degree temperature change. On top of that, a freezing temperature, that a plant's never seen.
More than anything for September, if we look and focus on September for a moment, I am keeping my eye out still on things that I'm planting for fall bolting, right? So those swings of temperature, right? Like, my spinach can take 40 degree, lows. It's just fine, right? But going up to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, repeatedly, it's not going to be that happy with that, And all of those things can happen in my garden in September and October,
I can't tell you how many lettuce plants I've had bolt in September because I planted them too early or didn't provide them the right amount of shade or something like that during this time of year. So it can be a harsh environment, to say the least, for the plants.
Yeah.
But if you want to do like a quick planting, now is a good time. Like you can still inside, I feel like you could still get away with planting like lettuces and kales and stuff like that because they're quick germinators.
Oh. So I remember planting kale out like right around September, maybe the second week of September. Okay. And I started those plants indoors. This is like the one summer I was successful with starting cool weather crops indoors during the summer. Under lights, I'm going to call it like mid-July. So that would have made it they were 2 months old when they went out. They were pretty small when they went out. Now, to the point that you'll continue to make, once that weather cooled off, they took off. Yeah. And especially if you're headed into cooler weather, it's not like you need a plant to be kind of sturdy and have the truest of true leaves before you plant. Like if you look back to the spring, you obviously are putting pretty young seedlings out. and you want them to be able to withstand kind of the real drop in weather in the spring. In the fall, most of us aren't in that situation. Like, you don't have to worry about it going down to 25 in September, 25 degrees Fahrenheit, right? You know, so you can still put pretty young seedlings out, is my point. I don't know if I'd say they're quick germinating, but I just have such a shorter pass when it comes to all of those crops and starting them from seed. As of the recording, things are looking good, but when it comes to what I've started, I guess the thing to
think about is they're not a fruiting plant. You know, it's not like broccoli or something like that where you have to wait for the head to form. I mean, you're literally harvesting the leaves.
That's huge. Yeah. That's huge. Clearly it's not a fruiting plant like you would normally look at, like peppers and tomatoes, but it's not producing a head, or it's not producing a root either. Right. You know, so I do think it's one of those things where you can really harvest it. So my new thing is the size of your hand or larger, right? You know, when it comes to like harvesting the leaves off of some of these plants. I mean, clearly, I actually started a bunch of kale, white Russian kale, from some seeds that I saved. Now, it must have been last year I saved them. They're all so embarrassing. For those that heard this the first time, yep, the kale plant is still in the bucket. Seed pods are still attached to the kale plant that's in the bucket. It's still in my basement. So anyway, I pulled some seeds off of it, started them, and my intention again is to plant them really, really densely and harvest the leaves really, really young. You know, so I don't need the plant to be, you know, that big going outside when I do take it outside. And I don't expect that particular set of plants, plural, to, you know, get up to their truest size. You know, like that's not my plan for that particular set of fall plantings.
But you can plant and then harvest in between and let some of them go to maturity.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah. Definitely. So, I mean, that's a big part of it because let me say this too. Another thing, and this is actually an ideal one for this time of year. And I've done this now, and I'm going to continue to do it, is like turnips and rutabagas and anything like that, like radishes or something. You can start those in a seed pod or, you know, inside or whatever, but you don't want them to grow for a long time inside. So they make very good candidates to kind of quickly plant them over before you actually start to get that root to form. Mm-hmm. So what go ahead.
No, go.
So what I do is I start them inside, and then like a month later, maybe even a month, I'll go ahead and move them out. And, you know, especially if I start them today and then we start getting cooler weather, I may just go ahead and move the whole seed pod outside and let it grow outside in, you know, in the containers, and before I replant them, because they're so fast to grow and get to that point. I don't want to say they're fast to grow, like form the root, but to germinate, to get to the point to where you don't want to be too late and the root's already forming in the pot. Mm-hmm. Then you can get that and move that over into the garden. And that kind of brings you into like what you can direct sow now for a quick harvest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Before you get into direct sowing, depending on your weather, definitely if you're in zones like 7 or higher, I'm kind of anticipating when your weather is going to get super cold, yada, yada, yada. You could still be starting some lettuce, right? You know?
Yeah.
Indoors for sure. I think that succession planting, gosh, I should set a daily reminder, like succession planting, you know, through direct sowing it's going to be key here, right? Like error on the side of it hasn't germinated, get another seed in there, right? You may find again, once that weather changes, shifts, you may see like some of the original seeds you dropped, you know, start to come up as well as the second ones you dropped. And all in all, for some of these, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of seeds in a pack, if not, you know, many more than that. So I think it's all good, especially if you save those seeds, man, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like, if you go into succession planting, like doing the turnips and radishes and stuff like that, I actually don't recommend doing radishes in the containers, but you can move those out. And then at the same time that you plant those plants out, you can direct sow to have an extended harvest because they will germinate quicker, but also they can tolerate cold. And so that's something that's really important to remember is a lot of these plants not only tolerate but love the chilly weather. I'm going to use chilly as a broad term. So, as your days get down into 40s and your nights even dip down into 30s, you can still, some of these plants can continue to, if not grow faster, thrive and really do some good.
Yeah. I was looking at my recipe for the day. We're still a little ways off of that, but I should have gotten it. I already know where I want it. I already know the recipe that I want to give again because it's just that good, and I'm about to make it. But so I'm earmarking it here. I think now I'm ready to move on to direct sowing. If you are.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay. So, go ahead.
No, I'm following your lead, buddy.
So for the direct sowing, it's like, think about what's most sensitive to the heat. Is there anything that comes in mind to you that's really sensitive to heat?
Spinach. No.
Yeah.
Peas. Uber sensitive to heat. And you're closing. I mean, your window is, for a lot of us, is probably closed to try to get some like sweet peas or snap peas in. If you're probably like on the West Coast in the U.S., it may not even get cool enough for you to really have a good run of them. But spinach is a good example, and I say that because as I was originally pulling up all of my great examples of fall sowings, last year I sowed spinach on September the 5th. Direct sowed, and it produced beautifully, but it bolted. It produced beautifully, but it bolted. So I was able to get a good harvest off of it, but it bolted. I'm gonna say maybe in like sometime in October. I was trying to look back to see. For sure, November 1st, it was when I did a big kind of final harvest. It was a lot of fall plants, a lot of cool weather crops, and I did have some. I think maybe most of those plants had bolted. But I was still able to enjoy the leaves, kind of the bottom leaves or whatever. But in that example, I didn't get, it was no cutting coming in. It wasn't like I got a second harvest off of that same spinach, just based on what my weather had done in September and October. I actually came back, I'm pretty sure, no, it was lettuce that I tried to sow again, later on in September. And it really didn't take off for me, so the same thing that I was successful when I sowed September the 5th, and it looked great as it grew. Things that I sowed in the last week of September just didn't have enough time for me to produce. But that's my story. I also on that September 5th direct sowed radishes. And there are all kinds of types of radishes, but think about kind of your normal small red radish. And it was the first time I actually had a 25-day radish from seed to harvest.
Yeah, like your French breakfast radish or something, your common radish.
That was early scallop globe. If you search for it, I may have mixed the words up, but early scarlet and globe is in the name. It was true to form, 25 days. I harvested the first one on September the 30th, and it was sown on, the 5th.
Yeah, I've done radishes of French breakfast, and I usually stick to those in your basic champion red radishes. And you're exactly right. In that time, I feel like that's the right time of year because as they grow, they'll be ripening as it gets cooler, so you get the better flavor.
Yep.
I can't grow spinach this time of year. It's too hot, and then it just gets cold too fast. So, I always hesitate, especially this time of year where I am in zone 8A, I hesitate in planting lettuce right now. I usually try and wait a couple weeks. But I'll do is I'll kind of go backwards in the show a little bit, and I'll plant those inside right now. So then in a month I can take them out and get them going because I can grow all the way up until lettuce gets affected by cold fairly easy, but I can grow them all the way up until like the middle to end of November pretty easily. But anything that I put out before, it's like a huge gamble if it's going to go, if it's going to, if it's going to bolt, like what's going to happen. So
I just comment on lettuce. I was looking at some lettuce that it was one of the lettuce mixes. Again, September 5th, 30 days of growth, all baby leaves, was beautiful.
Yeah.
I also, the year before, so not last year, but the year before that, I had lettuce again that I started from seed. I don't remember when I started it indoors, but I remember planting it out again on September the 11th. And it had like maybe 2 or 3 true leaves. It was super small. But the varieties that I selected really held on when it got into the colder months. So it perked up, started producing. That was the year where I had some pretty beautiful lettuce. I don't even think I did anything to protect it, like all through October, November, and like right into December. Now, I'm not going back to timeanddate.com to see whether or not it was a more mild winter, so it could have been that as well.
Collards is another thing too that you can kind of get in now because they're pretty resilient when it comes to heat. Because you grow those year round, right?
Come on, somebody. How many minutes of this episode do we need to go through before someone mentions collards? Definitely resilient. I've never planted collards for fall, but I'm going to do that this year based on my planting debacle earlier in the spring when I misjudged what I was actually planting. So I'm going to try it this fall. And I mean, I'm confident they're going to do well. That's just how I roll. Confident in part because I also transplanted out last year some kale, and I didn't write it down, but based on some pictures, it would have been about the first week of September. They were transplants, only a couple of true leaves. And I was, those things again, the weather got cooler. They were sitting around kind of like, what is this thing? Why is it 85 degrees, right? For a good while. But then coming into October, they took off. In November, I had harvested those greens all the way through. Again, planted in September, transplanted in September, all the way through December. It was around Christmas I was taking them off the plant.
Yeah. And that was with no protection, right?
No protection, yeah. I was all in there raw. Okay, I'm sorry. That's too much. We still have that explicit rating, right?
Say that again? You broke up.
I was just joking about me being a little bit explicit in my response. Yes, there was no cover.
So it's funny too because down here people really start planting collards in early September and it's hot down here. I mean, it's still full-blown summer heat. Yeah. But then you go and you drive through the country in the wintertime and you see nothing but rows and rows and rows of collards in like everybody's garden. They all have collards growing. So that's a really good one. And I mean, you can also direct sow those right now too. The biggest trick is going to be keeping it moist enough, damp enough for germination, which is, where my favorite thing comes in, mulch, where you can put the seed down and put a light coating of mulch on, and that will 100% help.
Yeah, I did that going back, not necessarily for fall, but filling a gap between kind of, we're in summer and we're headed, and I have an open space. So one of the things, again, you can apply a lot of what we talk about across seasons. I planted some loose leaf lettuce as well as some turnips. And, I really heavily mulched it. The one thing that the whole process was trying to create rows that I can plant in, but mulching everything else. And I think I may have even covered, ultimately, once the rain started coming, the wind started coming, the mulch started to cover where I planted. So that's something to consider when it comes to your sowing seeds, the depth you're sowing them in, and if you're using mulch like we both recommend, making sure like that mulch, if it's covering what you've sowed, that counts as the depth as well. It's basically the depth between where the seed lands in light.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the thing, and that's why they give you germination rates, times So you know that, hey, I can plant this seed, and then in a couple days you come out and you can just kind of work it a little bit around it. I mean, I put like a light coating of straw mulch. I used to call it hay, but I've been ridiculed about it. So straw mulch on it. And, you know, that way, even if it's just like a couple pieces of like a very light coating of it, light can still get in, but it's still providing some shade to hold that moisture in. So, you know, it's like I did my parsnips not too long ago, and I mulched them pretty heavy, but I also know they take 21 days.
Yeah.
So when I come back, I know that, like, hey, in a couple of weeks, I need to come back and just keep an eye on it and be prepared to move them, stuff like that. But it's either that or you just don't get any kind of germination whatsoever, which is something that I'm not really fond of because it feels extremely wasteful. And especially this time of year, it's a huge letdown to plant a bunch of seeds and then not get anything grow.
Yeah, that's so the idea of sowing heavily 21 days to germinate, like, you may get another chance, but if I do that, I don't have a second chance. Like, if it takes 3 weeks for that seed to come up, if it doesn't come up, I've missed my window, you know, so I'm increasing my odds by sowing more seeds there, which is against all of my garden nature, right? Like, I'm stingy, I'm Scrooge McDuck when it comes to dropping seeds. But I think that's an excellent point. Another thing to keep in mind, this is like, I'm trying to figure out if it's as, like, you need to baby in the sense of keeping a close eye out on. I had a whole set of carrot tops that were eaten down to like the stem. I'm certain that, you know, roly polies ate them. Ben won't believe me, but I'm certain that was the case. And so it's based on some other things that were in my garden, but I had stopped paying attention to them. And if I would have been looking, I would have seen, oh, well, shoot, I need to do something here because they're eating all of the leaves off of the carrots, which means that there's nothing for, you know, there's no photosynthesis happening because there are no leaves here. So I say that to say, keep an eye out for, as these young seedlings, again, we're right back here, are germinating, to make sure that nothing is attacking them, you know, to make sure that they're not being eaten up. Because again, your window may be a little bit longer than mine. You may get a second opportunity, but you probably won't get a third, you know? So, you know, if you get success, you've gotten it right and the thing is germinated, you want to make sure that you do what you need to do to keep it healthy. And sometimes, again, it's not having mulch, as an example, directly like on the stems of the plants. You know, it's kind of keeping in mind how wet or damp, you know, because really damp soil sometimes brings, you know, bugs in. So those are kind of things that it's just a little bit trial and error if this is your first time out. And if it's not your first time out, you already know these things. But again, something just to consider.
Well, and you bring up carrots too. So, well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So what I do is once things start to grow, I go back behind and then I just move the mulch a little bit out of it so it's not resting on the stem at all. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you live in a little bit more of a temperate climate, I'd say, and I mean, this is an average because it's based on how cold you stay, but I would say like zones 7-ish to 9-ish, you can actually do another planting of carrots now. And they may not exactly grow the carrot right now, but they will definitely get the green tops. They are resilient. They will hold over in the winter time. And then come spring, when they start getting more light and a little bit more heat, you'll have a harvest of carrots beforehand. I did that last year, and I did it as an experiment. And again, I had to plant when it was really hot, so things were drying out. But as I went back, and what did germinate, because I didn't really put a whole lot of effort into it, but what did germinate, I actually left it there and got a pretty good little harvest off of it. And so my spring carrots actually, they kind of struggled a little bit. So I realized that, like, hey, maybe this is the right time for me to grow. So this is part of my evolution of gardening, is like seeing what grows good at certain times and then making those adjustments when, like, hey, I can, like last year I grew carrots in the spring, got a fabulous harvest, pulled them up, and then tried to replant them in the summertime, and they just never took because it was just too hot. But by waiting that time frame, I can use that space for something else and then come back in and put my carrots into that spot. And then they'll grow. And even if you are in like zone 6 or something, you know, a little bit of cover will do a world of good for those carrots because you're keeping the frost off of it and stuff like that. You're warming it up during the day. The soil temperature will be warmer. So carrots are another good thing, especially because even though the packet says 75 days, it ain't ever less than 90 to 100. So, you know, just giving it that, let's say you plant it September 1st, and then let's say your first freeze. When's your first freeze?
Someone online is saying November 1st is the date now. It moved from like the October 29th to November 1st. So I'm rolling with it.
So November 1st, then you've got 60 days of them growing. And then even then, still, you could possibly even manage to get a harvest out of your carrots. Then I would say, you know, there's a good possibility that they could ripen up in that amount of time because they are a fairly hardy crop.
Yeah, you know? I think that that's the balance. I'm all for giving it a try because it just takes so little space to see if that works. But this is, you know, again, there are going to be themes you hear across these episodes. Where you're planting, how much sun that thing is getting, you know, making sure that, especially for these crops that take a bunch of days, like something that takes, you know, 5, 6, 7 days to germinate, you know, that's a winner chicken dinner. But things that take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to germinate, again, you don't have like this endless opportunity to continue to try to replant that. Make sure you're putting that in kind of a prime place, like give it the best chance. Yeah. Right. You know, and so I personally wouldn't sow carrots at this point, you know, as we are releasing the episode, you know, but perhaps, you know, next year and the beginning of August, maybe I'll try to squeeze some in. Now, that said, who knows, man? Maybe I'll take a container and put some seeds in and see how it works. Because, again, I can move that thing around. I'm just, to your point, I feel like 100 days is a really good spot to call carrots. You know, like I know the packet says 65 days, but, you know, you're good with pencil carrots and maybe that's okay.
Yeah. The pencil carrots, I like it. I mean, and that's the thing is you got to be comfortable. But, I mean, the other thing, too, is if you think about, like we talked about in the last episode, like how much do you dedicate to your garden for fall? And if you think about it, most people, you know, even though I said my ultimate goal is 100%, it never ends up that way. And I even have plans to leave sections of my garden empty. But why not just plant 1 square foot of carrots and just see what happens? I mean, what do you have to lose? You know, I mean, so what? If it doesn't make it, fine. But if it does, then you've already cracked the code. You know, you're one step closer.
Yeah,
so,
that's
I mean,
the
that's
thing. Like,
kind of,
I teetered and tottered on whether or not to put more squash plants in, and it's just an emotional plant, so I decided not to put myself through it. You know, like going back into the earlier part of the summer, like, all right, you know, we're past June, we're getting to the end of July, we're coming up on August, and I feel like I've tried it once or twice before and not been successful, and it's kind of like I'm gonna roll out with what I got, you know. But something like carrots, I think that's a really good example. Again, I think lettuce is a really good example of give it a shot. You know, you don't have a lot to lose. While I think lettuce seeds will last many more years, you know, like you can continue to use those seeds. Carrot seeds, from what I've read, their germination rate drops the older the seeds get. So shoot, sprinkle those things. Sprinkle me, baby. Sprinkle those things out there and let's see what happens.
Yeah, I usually go through as my carrot seeds get older, which, by the way, this year I harvested some carrot seeds for the first time, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh, cool.
I go through and, you know, I plant my carrots like every 4 inches roughly. So every 4 inches, I'll put 10 carrot seeds out, and then I'll just have to go thin them. But I do it, instead of just sprinkling wildly, you know, in that 4-inch spot, I'll sprinkle a few, and then I'll leave a gap, and then I'll sprinkle a few more, and then I'll leave a gap. And then that way I can go back and easily find them. Because I find that sometimes when I direct sow stuff, I get confused about what's the plant and what's a weed. So if I have like little batches of things that look the same, then generally speaking, I'm like, okay, we're good. You know what I mean? Like this is going to work out for me. So it's definitely, you know, something to try. And I mean, I think that fall is a good time to experiment with how long you can have things last within your garden, like throughout the winter. So you can get an idea of like, this is something good that I can do in the future. You know what I mean? Like next year I can push the envelope a little bit more maybe, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. Just like I'm doing with Brussels sprouts. You know what I mean?
Many of us are kind of, this is the last of our gardens. Like fall is our last at bat for the year, right? And so with that in mind, you know, why not play around with some things? Like I think you can have a kick-ass fall garden and harvest a bunch of food from it. But, you know, it's my hope that I'm not in a position where I have to feed my family just off of my fall garden, you know? So I say that to say, like, this is a great chance for you to kind of experiment with some things as well for the fall season, right? Because, again, this is a distinct time. While we may see some repeat crops, a lot of them perform differently in the fall than they do in the spring. I have limited experience with it, but I do have some experience with it. But it's a lot of what I've read online, a lot of what I've seen from other gardeners online. It's that same kind of truth, you know.
Well, and I mean, you know, we all learn by testing and figuring things out. So I definitely agree with like, hey, read something online, but then don't be afraid, because if you don't try it, you're never going to learn. You can read about it all day long, but until you try it, you're not going to know. So it's just like with me and carrots. Like I didn't grow carrots for a long time because I was just like, it's not really worth it. And then I started growing it and I was like, I don't know, it's kind of worth it. And I was the same with potatoes. You know, I just had my second potato meal. So, potatoes. So, I mean, it's just, you know, onions are on my list this year of things, of the nut to crack, you know, so I'm going after onions this year. I'm going to give it a shot and just keep expanding more and more, and not expanding my garden, but expanding my crops that I'm growing within my garden. You know what I mean? More variety and diversity and options.
I think onions are a good example of people have mixed experiences with them, with growing them, but you don't know how they're going to do in your garden until you plant them in your garden. You know, I think that based on the size that my onions are looking like now, I'm thinking that instead of trying to cure and store all of them, I think that I'll end up like chopping some of these smaller ones up and just freezing them, because I know I'll get use out of them. You know, there are a bunch of dishes that I don't need a fresh onion for, you know. Again, there's always a way to manage it. I was trying to look back, maybe even in August, I put a cabbage transplant out. This is the one that ended up like basically overwintering, and I thought it was going to grow a head of cabbage. So it didn't grow a head of cabbage in the fall of last year. You know, the plant was not in an optimal space. It was in the cage baby, and the bed inside of the cage baby that's behind the deck. So like it's the uber shady, right? And so maybe let's call it August, I planted it. It never really grew much. Plant sat, and then that next year it started growing, but then bolted. But I didn't get anything off of that plant, but I didn't regret planting it at all, because that's what I learned. If I want to grow cabbage this fall, maybe I need to plant it a little bit earlier, one, or maybe I need to put it in a space that's going to get, you know, a bit more sun, which I know is kind of counter to what we've been saying, but you need to give that plant, in my instance, a chance to actually start growing and putting on leaves, right? I may have, if I could track back, I may have missed the window, because I can actually grow cabbage all throughout the summer too, you know, for me. So
yeah, I see. It's not even an option for me. But now, you're exactly right. So getting it out earlier.
I don't know that I could plant summer, like I can like plant cabbage every month, but once I get cabbage planted in the spring, or if I get it planted in like right at the beginning of summer, it has produced for me. I just want to make sure I clarify that.
And I think, you know, getting that cabbage out there, and cabbage is another one that's really resilient. You have to, again, a gardener has to be forward thinking about the weather. So you have to anticipate in the fall less sun, cooler temperatures. So yeah, that cabbage may have to deal with some heat for a little bit. And you can, by planting in certain spaces and, shades and stuff like that, and temporary shades, let me rephrase that. You can definitely give it that relief from the heat and using the wetting down method and stuff like that. But once it starts to cool off and you start giving it that full sun, then it's going to thrive and it's going to really push forward. So that's something that you really, you want to anticipate that behavior from that plant. And I'm looking at the time, and I remember we were talking about onions. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. It was a couple of minutes ago.
You know what onions are? They're a really common ingredient for recipes. So I think that it may be time for Miss Batavia to give us her famous recipe of the day.
Oh, wait till you come back and you hear what I have. So my favorite recipe is a pickled pepper and eggplant dish. But I looked, it's just far too many ingredients and steps. So sorry, guys and gals. It's a great one. Next time, maybe I'll be more prepared and I can give it to you more succinctly. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a very easy recipe that's still delicious. And it is roasted Parmesan and garlic carrots, or garlic and Parmesan roasted carrots. However you want to say it. All right, so we're going to get a couple of pounds of carrots. Get those washed. We're going to cut those in half. You're going to get enough olive oil to coat those carrots, or whatever oil of choice. Remember, this is going to roast, so it's going to be pretty high temps. Get a few cloves of garlic. You're going to mince this garlic. So if you already have it in the jar, okay, that's fine. I use it all the time. If you still have some garlic from your garlic harvest, let's rock with that. Get some Parmesan cheese. We're going to grate that. And then we're going to get some, if you want, this is optional, and I'm just going to try to be conscious because we just came off of the August challenge. I want to try to be conscious and keep those good habits going. So you can use some breadcrumbs here if you want. Salt and pepper are going to be to taste. If you still have, which you should, some parsley in your garden, you can use that as a garnish. All right, we're going to preheat our oven to 400. You're going to use either parchment paper, or you're going to lightly grease or use cooking spray, a baking sheet. You have your carrots that are cut in half. I would add the olive oil, the garlic, and the Parmesan to a bowl. Stir that up. Then you're going to coat your carrots with that. Then you're going to put those carrots onto the baking sheet. My rule, I always say it, you don't want for roasting for this purpose for these veggies to be touching, so give them a little bit of room. And then you can top it with your breadcrumbs. You're going to put those down. You're going to bake it at 20 to 25 minutes. So maybe it isn't as much as roasting and more of baking. As you kind of look at your food that's cooking, maybe about 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, stir it around a little bit. I like it a little bit more crisp, so I'm going to kind of leave it in place. And that's it. Once you pull it out, sprinkle some parsley on it, baby. Sprinkle me, baby. And then serve. This is going to be a side for me.
I grew parsley one year and I wasn't impressed.
I'm very impressed by parsley.
Really?
I was watching a video and a lady was like, and then get some parsley, and she's like, I'm in the cabinet looking for my parsley. The herbs I use are mostly dry. So I'm not trying to be an herb snob, but it's completely different. I mean, a lot of dried herbs are completely different than the fresh ones. I mean, we know that. But it's a whole different, herb in my mind.
Yeah, the taste wasn't there for me.
Really? I felt like the taste is a bit, you remember did I give a recipe where you were adding parsley to the salad? It's pretty prominent. Maybe my taste buds are just, more heightened. Or maybe you just had some dull. I think once parsley starts to get old, it probably doesn't taste as bright.
Maybe I just don't like parsley.
Oh, that could be it too.
Yeah, that could be a simple explanation. Mm-hmm. But it was prolific. Good night. If I could get my cilantro to be that prolific, I'd be happy. Which is another one, by the way, for this time of year.
Parsley, pollinators love it. So I've had parsley come back the next year. I guess that'd make it a biennial, go to seed. And then, butterflies, man, they are all over it.
Really? Mm-hmm. Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That is everything seeds. We've talked about saving seeds. We've talked about planting and then a bunch of other stuff. Next week, we're going to continue this series. And specifically, we're going to let you know about when your fall garden will thrive. So we've definitely dropped some hints in it, but we'll talk a little bit more about it. This is geared... Well, really, it's for everybody. But if you're like really just thinking about fall gardening or you're unsure, this should help ease your mind a little bit. Because one of the big questions that we have, not we, but like I've had a lot of times is like, what can I expect out of X, Y, and Z? What can I, what am I going to see? And so hopefully we can help shatter that barrier for you. But thank you everybody for being a part of the show and being with us. Please check us out on Patreon, YouTube. If you want to do any garden shopping, check us out, our Amazon link below. And until next time, I think we're going to get Miss Batavia to say something real good.
Profound, even. See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please follow us on YouTube at Backyard Gardens TV.
Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV. Over on our website, backyardgardenstv.com. And then we have Patreon at Backyard Gardens.
And don't forget to check out our links below to help the show. Thank you so much for joining us as we learn to grow and grow for change. Cut.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck!
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.